Everything was good until Trump tweeted about the tariffs. The volatility is not good for any manufacturer.
I actually believe that it could be net positive for U.S. manufacturing, but not in 4 years. What I'm mostly worried about is getting whiplash from a bunch of changes and no time to actually build out a new way of doing business.
At least what I like to believe is that the president and the administration, there's a broader strategy at play here. Obviously, he talks about, using tariffs as a lever to get other things done. Whether that's effective or not, you can debate on, or we'll see, and hopefully it plays out to everybody's advantages.
Welcome to the Next Gen Metal Fab podcast. I'm your host, Tim Heston. In each episode, I'll be joined by a rotation of co-hosts: Caleb Chamberlain from Oshkosh, Cody Lee from Everyday Technologies, and Lance Thrailkill from All Metals Fabricating. Together, we'll talk about what the future could look like for precision sheet metal and tube fabrication.
Mark your calendars. The 32nd Annual Advanced Laser Applications Workshop will take place from June 17th to 19th at the Suburban Collection Showcase in Novi, Michigan. This event connects manufacturers and suppliers in automotive, aerospace, agriculture, and fabrication. Enjoy 3 days of presentations from leading experts, cutting-edge demonstrations, and fascinating open houses. Discover the latest advancements and applications that are shaping the future of the industry. Visit fmamfg.org to learn more. And now, back to the episode.
Just a quick heads up, this episode was recorded February 21st. News happens fast these days, so things might have changed by the time you hear this. But with that in mind, enjoy the latest from our Next Gen Metal Fab panel. Hello, thanks so much for joining us for the Next Gen Metal Fab podcast. Today, I'm joined by my usual roundtable of associates here: Caleb Chamberlain from Oshkosh, Cody Lee from Everyday Technologies, and Lance Thrailkill at All Metals down in Texas. We're talking the first quarter in February of 2025. A lot of things are changing, obviously. The news is evolving quickly, but just kind of want to get a sense of how things are on the ground. So, Lance, why don't you start? How's business?
Business has been pretty good. It's slowed down a little bit. Our WIP has gone down from where it was all of last year, but it's starting to build back up. Everything was good until Trump tweeted about the tariffs. We left work on Friday with material pricing, being stable and had been for a while. And we came in on Monday to, almost 40% increases in aluminum and 60+% increases in copper. That was a nightmare, and continues to be. Fortunately, we've been able to negotiate lower than that, but the volatility is not good for any manufacturers. And unfortunately, I don't think we have a loud enough voice at the table in Washington, which I know you guys at the Fabricator were helping to try and be a voice for us, and greatly appreciative of that.
Yeah, it's been an interesting time for readers. I've talked to a lot of them saying, all right, this is like a chess game. And one guy told me about the diversification of our portfolio, going, all right, this is my business. This is how diverse I'm going to be as far as customers, as far as areas of business, as far as material purchasing strategies, as far as customers. And now what have you got? It's not an ideal situation, but reality is what reality is. So Cody, so how's been your first quarter? Kind of give us the update.
For us, it's been really the opposite of what we experienced in Q4 and really just the second half of last year. I don't know if it's just a function of our customers that we do business with relative to other people. Obviously, we do a lot with some pretty large OEMs. They were pretty impacted with at least what it seemed, or the feedback we would get from some of our commodity managers and buyers was the whole not sure what's going to go on with the election, economy, all that stuff. So they slowed down quite a bit, especially in Q4. Even one of our bigger accounts, we were like shipping nothing to them November and December, which it's usually a slower time of year, but to ship virtually nothing was a huge impact to our business. So that made us pretty nervous. And we had shifted and tried to, explore some other areas to offset some of that revenue loss. So coming into the new year, which is typically our normal busy time of year, kind of Q1, Q2, it seems to have picked up quite a bit, which is exciting. If that's just normal cyclical business with our customers or a function of higher demand for their end users, I don't know yet. Time will tell as that continues to go through the rest of the year. We're definitely a lot busier today than we were, 2 months ago, 3 months ago. So in a good spot relative to the material. We got contracts with a lot of our larger material suppliers. at least through March. So we haven't felt any impacts there yet, but we are talking to them, and we do know that that's going to definitely increase. To the extent or for how long, we're not sure. But we have material contracts with several of our larger customers. So essentially, we have a quarterly price adjustment with them where, as material or the CRU index goes up, that gets passed along to them. So they kind of get the benefit on the way up where we get it on the way down. So from that standpoint, we're more or less protected. The other part of our business where we don't have those material contracts, we're just trying to stay proactive and making sure we're ahead of it. And I guess what that means for them is price increases coming up.
And they're expecting it. It's all over the news. It's just a matter of, is there a way to hedge at this point? Or I guess if you're going to hedge, you're going to hedge a lot. You were going to hedge last year.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously you could buy a
mm,
lot of material and keep on stock, just kind of expecting the market to go up. We don't do a whole lot of that just because of some of the situations that we have with customers and our suppliers.
yeah, it's a strange dichotomy because we see, some various OEMs going, all right, how are we going to restructure our supply chain? It's not an immediate thing. You can't just unplug an entire supply chain and replug it in the United States. And so the shops I'm talking to are on the front lines going, okay, how can we help you? And we're there wherever you need us during this rocky time. So Caleb, yeah, kind of give me a sense of where you are at as far as business in the first quarter, challenges, opportunities.
We're about 20 to 30% by week ahead of where we were last year. If you just sum up the year, we're about 30% ahead. We've seen some reduced demand in some sectors, but we're so diversified across a lot of sectors that there are certain areas that are impacted positively, very positively by all the stuff that's going on. So that's net positive for us. We decided to increase the amount of material we stock. So we have automation that says, order this much stuff, and we just increased the amount that tells us to order. So we brought in a bunch extra in anticipation of maybe difficulty fulfilling orders quickly and possibly increase prices. So we've tried to do that to manage the risk a little bit.
It's kind of an interesting time. I was on a CRU call actually not too long ago when all this happened. There were more than 1,000 people were on this call, just to give you an idea. They had a great presentation where their economist gave two potentials down the road. This could be a transactional tariff situation where it's just a negotiating thing and it's a short term, or it can be a restructuring, more long term, more painful in the short term and more unknown in the long term. We'll see where things head. One fab shop I know told me that, this is our opportunity. It's like, all right, let's see where we can add value, because the material negotiation part of it, if it's all material, then there's so much of it that's outside of our control. There's so much volatility. It's hard to plan long term for that. We can be big winners this year if we hedge correctly or make a smart buy or make a smart spot buy. But if we're not adding value, then that's kind of just a short term gain.
I mean, obviously, a presidential cycle, as short as it is really hard to make any dramatic, sustained changes to how the U.S. economy works. I grew up and went to college in this climate, like most people did, where everybody's really optimistic about globalization. I had one class in college where we talked about the class, or we read a book called "The World Is Flat," and the whole point was, hey, everything's different now, and everybody's so economically tied together that it's going to be the end of wars. And man, I sure wish that's how everything worked out. I'm afraid that that in order for globalization to work in the optimistic way that was predicted, is everybody has to play nice and by the same rules, and I'm not sure that happened, unfortunately. And now we're getting this pendulum swing in the opposite direction, where we're like back to mercantilist policies, and I mean, who knows what the end state of all that is. I actually believe that it could be net positive for U.S. manufacturing, but not in 4 years. So what I'm mostly worried about is that just getting whiplash from a bunch of changes and no time to actually build out a new way of doing business.
The biggest issue, well, not the biggest, I mean, there's so many issues wound up in this, but you know, the whole premise behind putting tariffs on imported metals is so that the domestic mills can win. But the reality is the domestic mills just jack up their prices as soon as, the tariffs go in place. And so, it really doesn't make any sense. And then it all rolls downhill to us. And so, yeah, sure, we're able to requote everything, but that's a huge pain. Talk about, we're a production facility. 90 to 95% of what we do is repeat jobs, and we don't historically have to requote those ever. And so now we're requoting every job, so yeah, sure, we can pass the cost on, but every time we do a quoting exercise, the customers take another look at it, and so what happens is the mills say, okay, sure, we'll pay the tariff, but we're gonna tack that on top of our price, and we're not gonna adjust our margin down. And the distributors do the same thing. And so then it comes to us, and it's like, so now that 25% is now much more than that, because their margins on top of it to, both the mills and the distributors. And then it comes down to us, and the customer's like, whoa, 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 like, this is too much. Wait, I heard 25%. Why is it this? And then they're getting granular on pricing because they know the material markets. For us, it's just the chaos and like the extra work. It's not even like the, we can pass a good portion of the cost on, but ultimately, like, we end up eating some margin on a lot of it, because when you have to requote, they're like pushing back on you on it. It's really the extra work and the uncertainty, that's really just a huge pain. And I think what, really, puts the cherry on top from my frustration is, the American mills we're not sending them more business. They're just jacking their prices up to go along with it. So what's really the point, And they're the ones. So I learned from actually you guys, the fabricator. They're the ones advocating for these tariffs so that they can increase their prices, make more money. And so the manufacturers don't necessarily have a voice at the table. And I think that's a big part of the problem.
It's an issue. There's a misunderstanding of supply chain in the broader public, I think, too, is they don't understand how value is added at each stage of the production and the nature of certain business models where, service centers live and die off of the price of metal, right? They thrive when the price of metal goes up. And so this is the opportunity.
The whole idea of like bringing it to the U.S., American mills could never keep up with even a fraction of the demand of U.S. manufacturing. Like, we have to have imported materials, right?
What does it take to build a new mill? Certainly not 4 years. Billions of dollars in a decade, probably. And then meanwhile, where do the mills buy pig iron? If we truly want this whole like U.S. vertically integrated, not dependent on other countries, which is all this business about the External Revenue Service. I think in 2 decades maybe we could get it to work, and it could potentially work. I mean, if we had more mineral exploitation in the U.S. and we had more mills in the U.S. and we had time to build that out, like the mill that does that gets better prices because they don't have to import and pay tariffs. Theoretically, all other things being equal, but we're not going to get there in one presidential cycle.
Well, here's a hot take. I agree with everything you guys are saying, 100%. We feel it in the same way, and I know our customers do too. And for all the reasons that we're sitting here saying, it makes 0 sense for what that strategy is from it. Lance, I agree with you 100%. It's not saving anybody money by putting tariffs on imported steel, given we know what's going to happen with all the service centers and the mills and how that gets passed along. It's an exact replica of what happened in early 2021. So this isn't like a news story that's playing out. But what is interesting is that, at least what I like to believe, is that the president and the administration, there's a broader strategy at play here. Obviously, he talks about, using tariffs as a lever to get other things done. Whether that's effective or not, you can debate on, or we'll see. But at the end of the day, Trump and the administration that he has tends to be pro economic growth and all the things that, us as business owners, especially in manufacturing, want to see. So I hope that this is part of a broader strategy that maybe I just don't quite understand, and that it's for the greater good in some respect. Obviously narrowed down when we look at it, and what it does in the short term sucks. But I know times were better in a Trump economy, and they weren't so much in a Biden economy. So my hope is that there's a bigger picture at play here, and hopefully it plays out to everybody's advantages.
The whole hype behind U.S. manufacturing, like it was nothing about his policies in 2016 in terms of, sure, there was tax benefits and things like that, but it was more just the hype behind the U.S. manufacturing, I believe, that really, like the day he got elected, like the faucet turned on, right? So I agree. And the only thing I can kind of think of, and my other concern is increasing inflation. And my only thought is, like, to your point, of a broader strategy, it must be that they're just hoping to raise wages for people too.
I actually agree with you, Cody. I actually think that there is a possible end state that's better. Increased spend is inflationary. Taxes are inflationary. If there's tariffs, that gets passed on to the consumer, that's inflationary. But imagine an end state where actually there is no IRS, there's no income tax, and it's all tariff based. Well, what is the end state of that if it were made permanent? And I think the outcome is, yeah, the anything imported, those taxes to get passed on to buyers. True, obviously. But if buyers are also not paying an income tax, that could actually work and be net equal, except that it forces United States companies to do stuff domestically, which is exactly what everybody wants. There's all this talk about reindustrialization. So I actually think it could work. And but I just don't know how long it's going to take to get there. And I'm not sure. I mean, you talk about stuff being better or worse under one president versus another. Policies set 10 years ago might have an impact today, or 20 years ago, or 5 years ago. It's actually really hard to draw a line for today's climate and this presidency, which is really ironic. I mean, we're seeing talk about like how bad things have gotten already for inflation, and they're pointing at Trump for that, which is just bonkers because it's been less than a month. That's not how it works. I think economic pendulum swings take way longer than one presidential cycle.
There's a metric that I like, value add per payroll dollar. And there was also a structural fabricator who did something similar for value added per man hour ton or something to that effect, where it was, all right, strip out inventory. How much money do you pay in payroll and how much value does that payroll provide? So every dollar you put in, how many dollars you get out? And we measured that in an FMA survey a couple of years ago, and it's about $2 to $5 depending. And it's a wide range because of different markets and where the margins are in certain markets, and also the different kind of technologies that you got out there. But I'm just kind of curious as far as how you guys are moving forward. All right, we've got these, we've got manufacturing technology, we've got strategies to move forward. How do we make sure that each employee is adding as much value as they can versus now I've, it's like, yeah, they want to increase manufacturing, but you can't, you can't have, we can't have manufacturing of the past. It just can't, you can't have that many people on the payroll. It has to be more automated. Otherwise, there's no scaling.
Lance, you probably better speak to that. We were talking about that not too long ago.
Yeah, we're laughing because I messaged Cody about that in the past month. And so, yeah, something we're measure is dollars shipped per employee. And so that's kind of similar to what you're talking about. I think we were at $254,000 per employee last year. And I was telling Cody, I think this is a great metric, and ultimately, like, EBITDA per employee is what really matters. So, like, you're going to take a deeper dive into that and haven't gotten to it yet because it doesn't matter with revenue if you're not making money. But assuming you are making money, I think that's a great tool for us to. I was telling him it's where I got this from, or this idea from, was from Good to Great, the flywheel concept, and the hedgehog concept rather, and having a financial metric and trying to hone in on what is our financial metric as our to complement our goal of being the best and most automated contract manufacturer in the world. And that's text Cody. I'm like, I think this is it, because really what that tells you is how much more you can get out per person in terms of dollars or profit. More importantly, that tells you how much more efficient you're being, how much more value you're adding per employee. That's something that we're tracking. We've actually been tracking that for 20 or more years. And I'm looking back just in the past few years of, like, in years that we were down, like, that was way down. Part of it is you got to have the business, right? You got to be cranking it for the pipeline full and keeping people, busy, because people just take as much time as they're given to do a task in general. Like, we're all guilty of that.
That's similar to sales per employee. We did a survey a couple of years ago when the material prices went through the roof dramatically the last time this happened. And sales per employee went crazy because and they said, oh no, that's all material. It's pass-through revenue.
Yeah, I can't remember. So that'd be 2021. I don't know that number off the top of my head. I could look back at my sheet, but I think 2021 254, I think, was the best we'd had, actually. But yeah, I mean, to your point, Tim, like having a higher material costs will move the needle, but I don't know that it moves the needle that much because you look at your typical job, like material is going to be basically like a third of the cost of the part, the third being like so depending on the nature of work from each given shop, but general rule of thumb. So if like that third goes up, whatever, 10, 20%, by the time the total dollars of the job doesn't make a huge difference.
And I just also want to throw this question out there where, again, tumultuous month, last month. How's your sales and marketing strategy as far as, all right, what markets are we in? What markets do we want to be in? How do we diversify to make it through these next 4 years, depending on what happens?
I don't know if this is coming out of the election and there's more optimism or if it's just a coincidence or what, but there just seems to be a lot more opportunities that presented to us today. If I rewind 4 or 5 months ago, me personally, I was almost in panic mode because I had not seen it. I've been in the business for 3 years, right? It was the first like downturn I've seen since I've been here. When I first got here, it was early 21. Everything was gangbusters. Like you couldn't make enough parts, blah, blah, blah. And then there was a correction, but it was still relatively stable. And this was kind of my first experience in a pullback from our customers, and where the common thread between all of them seemed to be, oh, we're just kind of waiting, seeing what the what's going to happen with the election and all that stuff, and you're just like, come on, really, is it really going to move the needle that much? But if that's your answer, that's your answer. So on the back side of that, we've gotten so many people that we've gotten so much stuff to quote among different industries. It's really exciting. So for us, it's the pivot for us is just we get to be a little bit more picky, so to speak, versus, hey, we got to pivot completely different because we got to fill up some of this revenue. We got people we got to keep employed, et cetera. Maybe different for other people. Everybody's impacted by the economy, depending on the industry and the business that you're in. But that's the position we're in right now. So for us, it's really just identifying like what type of work fits us the best, what makes the most sense. You're not really kind of going out there in left field just to make sure you bring work in.
So Cody, that's very interesting because you mentioned, all right, you get to pick and choose. Do you have an ideal customer profile?
Yeah, someone who's got net 15 terms and wants to give us millions of dollars. But if I had to make exceptions, I get really excited when anybody has anything to do directly or indirectly with the data center industry. I know Lance has had a lot in telecommunications and ultimately data centers and stuff like that. And there's been a lot of growth for you guys from that standpoint. I feel like a lot. It's the buzzword of today for sure. We're seeing a lot of opportunities, and it's funny because you would expect to hear someone say like, "Hey, we're building this specific thing for a data center," but what we found is that we've probably got 4 or 5 customers that when we started to engage with them, we either didn't really know what their end product was or what they were servicing, or if we did, we got it wrong because they have some power distribution division within their organization that's servicing data centers indirectly somehow, whether it be through generators or whatever it may be. I don't think that's going to be demand that softens anytime soon. I'm sure it'll hit its peak and dive down eventually, but for right now, we're kind of focused on trying to serve that market.
Right. Lance, are you in oil and gas at all?
No, sir, not very much. Very, very, very little.
And you've reduced your telecom exposure over the years, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I think it was like our biggest customer was 15%. It's probably under 20. So and you heard Caleb say, I mean, so they're up 20% since last year. And I mean, diversification is the key. That's what I would tell every shop. And, that's what, me and Cody were talking about. And they started getting into data centers. And, it's the more diversified you are, the better you're protected in downturns, because chances are, um, not every industry is going to be impacted negatively all at once. And if so, you're going to be hurting either way. Right. So Caleb's like the ultimate diversification model. We serve virtually every industry. We're continuing to market to alternative energy, and data centers is a two that we're really going after. I feel like that's the most opportunity. Really struggling with deciding on CMMC and aerospace. So we do a, couple percent in aerospace. And I just see a massive opportunity looming there, but don't really have the buy-in from my leadership team to go adjust our business model for something that we have 2% of our business for.
Is that because of all like the certs and stuff that you have to have along with that?
Yeah, it just the impact that the CMMC requirements have on your general business, which we don't need to get too technical on it, but there's ways around that specifically by utilizing an enclave, which is you can do a virtual one, which we just learned of and made it much more attractive, or like having a locked room that only certain people have access to, but yeah, just the impacts of your processes and training everybody, and then plus it's gonna be, $100 to $200,000 to implement, and then, $25 to $30,000 of audits every I don't know if it's every year, every 3rd year. They don't even see, the problem is they don't have enough there's not enough IT companies to implement this. First off, all the manufacturers are dragging their feet on it because the requirements kept changing and changing and changing. So even shops that do almost all the work in aerospace have not even been implementing CMMC like they should have. And so you have government now saying you have to be CMMC 2 point or class 2 certified to do government work. Well, there's only I forget all the numbers, but there's only a certain amount of IT companies that are certified to implement that for you, and there's millions of manufacturers that are dependent on it. And then they don't even have auditors to audit it, which is actually probably a good thing. But to actually, I think, become fully certified, you can self-certify, which is sufficient right now. But to become fully certified, that you have to get audited by a government auditor. And so I just foresee a huge gap in the of manufacturers and defense companies between what defense companies need and the manufacturers being able to fulfill those needs because of how much everybody's drugged their feet on CMMC. And so we were compliant, which all you had to do to be compliant, the reason I did air quotes, was because all you had to do is have a POAM in place, which is a process for implementing the requirements and be moving the ball down the field somewhat, and just showing that you've done something to move towards that for the last 2 years. So that's what we've done, and our certification expires in May. So we were already kind of behind the 8 ball, because I don't really struggle with decisions, but this is one I'm like really wrestle with. It's like, man, and it's not about the 100 grand. It's, I could put 100 grand on black, but it's more of like the shift in the organization, and like the implications that it has on your staff, and then legally. So like, then you as the owner, like if y'all aren't following those processes, then like you can go to jail. You know what I mean? So there's a huge liability on the owner. Okay, we just hit pause on it, and we're like, the place we came to was these customers are going to have to call it Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics. They're going to have to come to a place where they bring somebody alongside these manufacturers to help them, and then like even the smaller shops like get grants and all these things, but help them move the ball down the field. And we'll wait for that. It's kind of what we landed for now. But yeah, I mean, that's something we're looking at marketing to. We've been marketing to that, and it's like we haven't really got anything. That's the other thing. To get one of these contracts, like just getting onboarded with them is a 6-month to a year process, and then you gotta go win the business, and you got to be in there here to win it. So it's a huge long sales cycle.
The sales cycle is the exact opposite of Ashkat's cycle.
Actually, we've never done any government contracting at all, and we get asked about it. In fact, just this morning, we got asked about it by a customer, and they sent us this vendor onboarding package that was literally 25 pages long, and had all these. I mean, you guys have seen these probably, but requires all kinds of stuff. CMMC is one of them, but there's also FAR and DFARS and EAR and EO and DCAA, accounting compliance and all this stuff. And I'm like, man, I know what all this is, and we can tool up and get compliant, but like I really want to just be able to take an order online and turn it around in 2 days, and for a really great price. I feel like aerospace and government contracting is like inimical to that.
Totally.
I'm not sure you can do both.
Yeah. And that's where my leadership team landed. Was like, we're a production facility, blow and go. Like, this is like, even just how you quote it. Like, we would need an estimator dedicated to that.
Administrative nightmare.
Yeah, not to mention that every single one of those self-certifications you make, I'm like, man, I'm not sure I can fill this document out and not accidentally violate one of these things. There's just too many things that I would need inside counsel, and I need to, like, there's so much overhead to actually do that well and not accidentally end up in prison if somebody comes after you.
Lance or Caleb, do either of you guys, because I've not gone down the rabbit hole with any of that far. You guys certainly know more about it than I do, but um, there is an interesting parallel between like one of the pain points I have right now, where a lot of these customers that we're getting opportunities with, the sales cycle from introduction, whether it's through an email, Teams call, whatever, to getting that first RFQ, to potentially being in the running to win a bid package, whatever it is. And then you get hit with well, hey, before we move any further, we've got this quality self-assessment audit that we want you to fill out. And, it's a spreadsheet document that's got 9 tabs at the bottom that are really, really long. You've got to fill out all this stuff. You fill that out, send it to them. Then they send a supplier quality engineer out, or a team of people, and do their own audit on that. And we've gone through that several times. Sometimes it takes 6 to 8 months. Sometimes others are more lenient or don't have the quality resources to really, dig in deep to your organization. But nonetheless, there's a lot of overhead, so to speak, where you've got to have people that understand it, can talk to those folks and fill out those audits and do all those things. And what's interesting is, on one hand, it's kind of a competitive advantage that you have a company that whenever an OEM says, hey, I need you to do this, this, and that, we're like, yeah, we do those all the time. We'll do it, even though we're like shaking our head like, God, here we go. But we can do it. And then on the other hand, it's like, man, I just want more customers where they send me a package of parts, and if I'm competitive, they send me a purchase order. And that's the extent of it. And that could happen in a week. I want more of that. They have their pros and cons, certainly on the OEM side. But Lance or Caleb, you probably not so much given your business model. But Lance, did a lot of your customers, at least ones that you've that are newer or whatever, do you see a lot of that, or a trend that way?
We've seen more of it. I would say the trend has been yes. We've seen more of that. The way I look at it is, the opportunity has to warrant the investment. On the government side, like when we were talking General Dynamics, they were like, you can bill for all of that, which was news to me. And we do, like, I always tell people, like, hey, whatever quality requirements you want, we can offer. I said, we'll do whatever, but there's a cost associated with everything. Like I say that all the time. We'll do whatever you want, but there's a cost associated with everything. So we're happy for you to pay us to learn new things and get better, which has been part of it. If you just say yes to everything, then they're going to run you over. Sure, we'll do whatever you want, but you're going to pay us for it, right? I think, and that's where we kind of draw the line. And the other thing I'd say is, like, the longer the sales cycle of landing it, typically the stickier the customer. So, like a lot of people aren't going to want to go through that. Not all of us can have Caleb's amazing business model where, like, he's getting 100 to 200 new customers a month. Typically the ones that are like come in and send you an order in a week later, and they could be gone quickly as well. So I think it goes back to, like, kind of what Tim was asking too, like, who's your ideal customer, and really defining that. For us, it's, I mean, ideally somebody that at least has $1 million a year in sheet metal spend, has brackets. We've got like a parts type list that we refer to that is ideal for us. And really core values alignment. So, um, and that's the trickiest one, because you can't really, like, really know their core values, but you can get some early indicators. But I think really nailing down your ideal customer and, like, making sure your core values align is a critical aspect.
We use net terms that they ask for as a leading indicator. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but we have a credit application. We let them say what terms they want. And if they ask for net 90 and above, we just don't offer terms at all. And we let them go somewhere else,
It's genius.
just like as a matter of policy.
Dude, that's genius.
Well, it's funny on the net terms things. I mean, that's another thing that's another trend that I've seen with a lot of OEMs. I mean, we do business with a fairly large, very large customer, or OEM rather, that we do a little bit less than $1 million with. I think last year we did like $800,000 with them, but we've gotten turned on to other branches or other divisions within the organization that has opened up a whole lot of opportunity, which is exciting. Um, but for years that we did business with them, we were, I think, net 30, maybe 45 with them. And then out of the blue, they sent us a letter basically saying effective immediately, we're going to net 120. And we were just like, what the hell? Like, what do you do? Because they almost get you in a position, or at least what it feels like. And I've got a quick follow-up story after this, but at least what it feels like is it's like, if you do push back on that and say, no, we're going to stay just where we're at. We're fine. Thanks. There's this risk of them saying, well, hey, there's 10 other suppliers lined up at the door that will do it for the same price, except they'll accept our terms, and you kind of have this fear of like, well, crap. I mean, do I have to accept this, or can I push back? And Lance, I mean, you're always saying, don't let them call the shots, don't be afraid to stand your ground. And I agree with that. It's scary to actually do it. But I did have a success story with it. A large OEM, and they were 120, and they came in and we had a meeting, and they said that out loud. I said, well, we don't go past 60. And they're like, well, I'm sure we could talk about 90. And I'm like, listen, I've had enough of this story. I can't take on another one. So it's either net 60 at the most, or we probably decide to stop. And they're like, no, we'll make it work. We'll make it work.
There you go. Let's go.
And after the meeting, I'm sitting around talking to our team, and I'm like, as excited as I was about that, on the other hand, I'm like, dude, like, I got to get some balls. I got to go talk to some other customers right now, because apparently we hold more cards than we actually think, which is probably true. But it's always scary, because the risk is that, do I want to give up this $2 million account because I want to push back on terms? I mean, where do you draw the line? That's the risk you run for sure. But maybe we could get away with it more than we think.
I'm actually offended by people using manufacturers as banks. Like, I don't do that to my suppliers. And I understand why they do it.
You know why they do it? It's not personal. The buyer's not doing it because they feel personal obligation. There's some top exec up there that's driven by his shareholders' price, or by the share price of their stock, and the cash flow that they're able to generate. So why wouldn't they make it 120? I'm not saying it's right, but I know why they do it.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, if you can lean on your supply chain, and you just, your cash conversion cycle drops to a negative number, so now you have float that you can just, I mean, that's compelling, and it looks really good on the balance sheet. But like,
It's terrible for your supply base.
I don't know, it's just like pure financialization. I don't ever want to leverage our scale to do bad things to, and we could. Like, I think we're in the top 3 of most of the service centers in Utah, and we could certainly leverage that to give them unfavorable terms. But I mean, their margins are already so slim. I want a long-term relationship with these guys. I'm not going to ask them for net 60 even. It actually offends me when customers ask for that, and that's actually why we have the policy. We're going to let them try, and if they try, we're going to say, well, we want to partner with our customers, not get exploited by them. So thank you, but no thanks.
Yeah, I agree with your stance on it for sure. I'm not going to argue with you.
I mean, I get it. We're a very different business, so I'm not saying that's what you guys should do.
No, it goes back to core value alignment. It really goes back to core value alignment. Like, are you partnership oriented? Are you profit oriented? And like, if they're purely driven by profits, then like long term, they're gonna ultimately go somewhere else anyways. Like, they're gonna find like, and that's originally why I went down the CMMC rabbit hole, was because I'm looking, how can I make more like, we're not gonna be the cheapest shop. We don't want to be the cheapest shop. Like, you want a cheap shop, go somewhere else. And so, knowing that, and I know your business, Cody, like, you're not trying to be the cheapest either. And so it's like, if that's their motivation, then let them go somewhere else. And that is scary, but the reality is, like you said, you've got more leverage than you think, because, and if you don't, then like, I'm not saying you, but just to everybody out there, like, if you don't, then you're not adding enough value to your customer anyways. And why wouldn't they just go somewhere in, when the dollar's cheaper somewhere else? But it goes like, the long view in business is to have partnerships and that you can count on, like that. You don't want your customers having to go quote 5 other shops down your check your pricing. Like, you want people that can trust you. And so if people are not interested in that type of relationship, it's only going to save you pain in the long term, and it's like, but they're, I love what Caleb was saying. It's like, I've actually heard my dad say that, like, we're not your freaking bank, so It's just like, man, if that's what you want, like what you're communicating to me is that you don't care about me and my business being successful. And if my business is not successful, then you're not going to have a vendor.
It's interesting when I hear, on the flip side of that, we're talking about, the collections end of it. But on the flip side of that, you were talking about, trying to ramp up with all these these customers requiring acronyms, for the if anybody else doesn't know, CMMC, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. With this, I was talking with some actually sales and marketing folks who were and also just top line revenue growth concepts that actually will be discussed. They were discussed at FabTech, and they're discussed at the FMA annual meeting. But that they can accelerate that cycle of initial contact to first order through AI, large language models, customizing these tools to do the busy work and really streamline aspects of quality control and inspection, as long as you can track everything on the shop floor and say, all right, you've got everything here. Let's just feed this in. And we've got these security models in place, and these quality models in place will really be able to truncate that down, and we can really open up our sales funnel so that if something does happen on the back end and you're looking at customers that as one fabricator told me, the customers to call, so to speak. It's hard to do that, but you can really get killed if somebody doesn't if your the collections are difficult. So it was an interesting conversation. We'll see where it heads. It's another application of AI that we may see in the coming years, especially since we've got some open source models. People can download them, and it's a way that's not. Um, I know Caleb's been using it obviously for software development. He wrote a great column about it. But that's yet another application is to streamline the front end so that it doesn't take months to land an account, so that so that you can grow your business exponentially, and you have less of a constraint on the front end to try to land these things. So, but anyway, well, guys, this has been a great conversation, and it's an honest conversation. So, but it's what's interesting is what one question before we go. One question I did want to ask Caleb again, because you have the unique business model here with tracking all the orders, that long tail of orders that you get, lower quantity, high mix. What are there any shifts in trends from last quarter that you're seeing, or is it pretty much 20% up, just going up? And as far as the types of orders you're seeing, the verticals that you're seeing, I don't know if you break down the data.
Yeah, actually, anything defense related that we can do is definitely spiking, like U.S. defense related manufacturing. We're seeing an awful lot of that. For the most part, honestly, like we've made some big changes to how our platform works and how much we charge for accelerated lead times. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's kind of big picture, like how do we say yes more? How can we make U.S. manufacturers competitive for like consumer, like non-defense manufacturing in the U.S. because we're just flat out not. We're like 5x the price. So what are the structural problems of that? How can it be fixed? And I actually think it can be fixed, and I think I want to fix it. And there's probably like a 2-hour conversation about, I think, what knobs we have to tweak here to make that kind of thing happen. And it's actually pretty cool and exciting.
So again, thank you for joining us for Next Gen Metal Fab, and we'll see you next time.
The Next Gen Metal Fab podcast is a production of Fabricators and Manufacturers Association and part of the FMA Podcast Network. The show is hosted by Tim Heston and Caleb Chamberlain. The podcast is produced and edited by Garrett Slager and Dana Weicker. Additional production support by Dan Davis, Andy Flando, Mike Owens, Billy Culpa, Elizabeth Gavin, and me, Sarah Spring. Thank you for listening.
See how things are doing